Well, welcome to Foiling Week 2021 and the Gurit Forum. I am Chris Museler, your host, and I have Laura Marimon, who is a senior researcher at SSPA, a maritime consultancy firm, but she did her PhD at where, Laura? The University of Southampton?
Yeah, the University in Southampton, and I was also based for the Bermuda Cup in Portsmouth with Benettley Racing.
Awesome, the British team in the two America's Cups ago. Awesome. And our guests today are going to be talking about the AC-75 from the most recent America's Cup, which is probably one of the most fascinating classes. It's funny to even call it a class because there's just a couple of them, but it is a class, and it's probably one of the most influential classes in the world. Our guests are Guillaume Verdier and Elise Beavis, both of Team New Zealand, both, am I correct in saying both still working for Team New Zealand?
Yep, I'm back working at Team New Zealand already.
Cool. And Guillaume, you are a consultant to Team New Zealand from your own design firm. But are you working with Team New Zealand right now, or are you on a break?
Not right now. I'm on a break. And, yes. I give advice. I still give advice.
Cool. I won't ask if you're going to be working for them next year.
No, I will be engaged with Team New Zealand.
Okay, cool. Well, then that's good to hear. Our other guest that we are waiting for, but will pop in like a superhero, which he kind of is Francesco Bruni from Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli, who I'm pretty sure he will be with Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli in the next America's Cup. We hope, because he was a fantastic skipper along with Jimmy Spithill. All right, so today's topic is kind of dissecting the AC-75, how the concept was conceived, and also kind of what a large, we know the Moth and the Wasp that Elise sails are small foiling monohulls, but it's an entirely different universe trying to do a large foiling monohull. And this is kind of really in the world of sailing and hydrofoiling, kind of the first of its kind. But it was a big risk to do it. So what we want to talk about is how this design was conceived, what tools they used to design it, kind of being very creative in terms of how to even allow this boat to fly, but also how to develop it to race and go faster. There's a lot to be learned in the world of our sport and engineering, design, construction, and also technique in sailing these boats. So, and then we have another cup cycle coming up, presumably in the same class. So we want to see what things look like going forward, what we learned from this last cup, and what's going to be important for everyone to understand what the design differences and tools they used going forward. So Elise kind of tipped me off again in one of our blind spots because everyone's so far ahead of us because we're not in the weeds with foiling in some classes, where these boats came from and who really, I know there was a push for monohulls from the different stakeholders in the America's Cup after 2 cycles with foiling catamarans. And I never saw it coming that they were going to say a foiling monohull. I thought they were just going to do like a big maxi super fast keel boat, maybe even a canting keeler. So at Elise's suggestion, Guillaume, where did the foiling monohull concept come from? Was that always the #1 goal when you guys came up with this new class and new rule? Or did someone come out of the corner and say, hey, let's make it foiling and let's do it this way?
No, so what happened is there's been a push at the end of the Bermuda campaign from the Italians to go into monohull, and it had to be a pretty big boat. And when you're a challenger, you discuss with those that have won, and so we had to agree with them, and they were pushing us to do a monohull with or without foils. I mean, that was not the question. Just come back to the bigger group of sailors, something that looks more like a bit of a mix. That I think they wanted to have a bit of a mix of what they saw in Bermuda on of the previous boats, and to have real, sailors and not cyclists on board, etc. And by coincidence, maybe 2 years before the Bermuda Cup. I was on a pre-project for a person called Howard Spencer. Ray Davies was actually his client, so he's a owner of New Zealand that used to race many racing boats here near Auckland. And Ray Davies used to sail with him, and Ray says to me, "There's a project to be done with Howard Spencer of a 40-footer boat, could be a foiling boat. We don't know exactly what." And discussing with Ray and so on, we said, "Okay, how to make a monohull foiling?" And making a monohull foiling is doable. So because we were doing it in open 60, but they were not foiling fully, but we knew that with an elevator that'd be fine. So I first start putting a keel, and foils a bit like on the Volvo or Imoca, like very sketchy. And Ray interfered and said, "Guillaume, you see, we really have one keel too many there. We should get rid of the keel." And I said, "Well, we've got the stability issue that any boats going a little bit further than the beach need to comply when they are real boats, not a beach dinghy, which is the stability." And came to my mind the idea of Deflin, that Martin Deflin was a French naval architect. He still is, I think. And he was doing twin canting keels. And we had studied that in Open 60 well. Twin canting keels are
with lead.
With lead, but
yeah.
No foils, but just, there's quite a few that were produced. And probably there's been some other guys. And I had forgotten also, but one guy talked to me about such a concept of canting. I'd completely forgotten because it was for a cruising boat. So it went off my mind. And I rejoined it later on. I can't remember his name. But so I said to Ray, well, if we need to dissociate the static stability from the dynamic stability. And the static stability, well, you could well put the lead in the foils, and then dynamically, the lead will be pushed up on the leeward side, and in the windward side will create a lot of righting moment. It only took like 2 days of work, and even an Excel sheet to show that, we know a foil is pushing 3 to 5 tons per square meter roughly, and so you quickly have the big size, big numbers in head, and really quite quickly we came to say at least it's 50% more efficient than on Open 60 kind of concept, at least 50%. So we carried on a little bit this thing, and we start making VPP at the time with Gombok. On the pre-project started and worked really quite well. And for some reason, when we finished to make the pre-scantlings and everything to be priced, that was probably, I don't know, 6 months before the Cup or 1 year before the Cup in Bermuda. And the project was too expensive for Howard Spencer. He said, "I prefer not to invest too much into such a project at my scale." And so that ended up there. And when the Italians pushed for this monohull, Ray Davies took our projects, and I say our projects because really it came up with him and me, and so he put it on the table. I was not there when it happened, but Elise, you were there, I guess. But
Yeah.
I think he gave you a bit of time to play on the simulator with this concept.
Yeah, I think in the office, Bobby was, I think, playing with the VPP model of it a bit. And I've been making a whole lot of simulator models and Gomboks. We've done Imoca style foils, all these sort of different semi-foiling concepts, which, progressively got crossed off as we found, sure, they, can foil on a reach, but for windward leeward match racing, they weren't very good because you ended up just dragging the foils through the water upwind. So yeah, we sort of had the full displacement option, or we had the early canting T-foil options. Yeah, so Bobby was doing stuff with it and then sort of handed that one on, and Ray and I did sort of all the initial simulator sailing. So I guess we had the real faith in our tools from Bermuda campaign with the cat, and how the VPP and simulator and Gombok, and how close that was to reality, to have sort of faith that if it worked in the simulator, it could work in real life. So like that first video where the class got announced well prior to the rule and stuff, that was from Ray and I sailing in the simulator, and ARL took sort of XY positions, heel, trim, etc., and then recreated it with the advanced graphics. So yeah, we had to push the Italians a bit to accept the concept. Yeah, so yeah, we really had to prove to them it was the best option and fight for it a bit. But
I think they really liked it, Elise, when we sent a video game to them. Oh,
yeah.
Francesco is coming in.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello,
Ciao,
everybody.
Francesco.
I'm on my car. Hi.
That's okay. We'll take it. And you came at a really awesome time, because we were talking about the evolution of the AC75 rule. And we went from the very beginnings of just even the conception of the concept, and then all the way, now we're at the conclusion of the 2017 Cup, pitching the idea of the foiling monohull to the Italian team. And Elise was saying it took a little bit of selling to get your team to say, hey, okay, we'll buy into this kind of unproven concept.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think they did a fantastic job, because we were a little bit skeptical at the beginning, but then it proved to be a fantastic concept. So yeah, heads off to their team and what they've done.
Awesome. Now let's get into the weeds a little bit with some of the design tools, that allow this class to develop, and then the evolution, like how your tools either improved or changed over the couple years that you had from design concept to actually racing in December. And Laura understands these design tools better than I do, but I'll ask the first question, which is the simulator technology that you all developed through the last 2 Cup cycles before that, San Francisco and Bermuda. It seems to me that there was a big evolution from 2017 to 2020. Was this class couldn't have been created without those improvements in design technology? Is that correct? Like in simulator technology?
I think the simulator it was a great tool and helped a lot to the development of the boats. But I'm not sure it's totally fair to say that the boat could have not been designed and born without it. I think for us, at least, so with Luna Rossa, the simulator was a fantastic tool to really improve the performance of the boats. Mm-hmm. It was not always perfect. It cannot be, but for some things was very useful, very quick to give us answers to our questions.
Cool. And Elise, in terms of the using simulation, the other thing that a term, so I understand, the general public understands that we used to think in 2017, the simulator had to do with the people getting more time behind the wheel, like how the boat responds to, turns and performance and the kind of the mechanics of sailing the boat. And we learned very quickly that when you guys say simulator, it's more like running slight changes in design around a course, those kind of things like Francesco's saying. we now understand how those tools work a little bit. We don't have to get into the weeds in terms of the improvement in the simulator over the last couple of years, but at least a term that we never knew of until we saw a video of you on a chase boat was, I think the term is mechatronics.
Yeah.
So explain to us that kind of design world and how that applies to how you guys use that in terms of developing the class, analyzing performance, and improving performance over the last couple months.
Yeah, so I don't know how much it's used overseas, but you can do mechatronics engineering degrees in New Zealand. So it's sort of born out of the mechanical engineering department, but it's typically thought of as robot engineering. So it's more that sort of that programming side. So yeah, the guys, it's sort of the electronics, hydraulics, software kind of interface that sort of all gets pulled together under this mechatronics term. So yeah, like all of our, and you're saying about the simulator before and how, you know, used for sailor practice. And I'd say that's particularly like for our backup sailors, them to actually get time using the devices in case they had to shuffle on the boat. And yeah, as you said, also in terms of comparing different design options, but then also the other thing for the simulator is actually testing boat code and input devices on the yacht. So with the simulator, we have the same PLC code running that runs on the yacht. We use the same input devices, so like the spare wheels, so it can be a bit of a fight between the simulator and the boat or the electronics container to actually have access to the devices when you want to use the simulator. They're trying to make changes or something. So yeah.
So you're using that. Laura, can you give us also another perspective on that in terms of your impression of the data coming in and that interface? So where is the information coming from? Sensors, you know, and other data sources, and then that's coming into Elise's computer and being analyzed and has an output. So maybe Laura, from your perspective, meaning someone who's smarter than I am, doesn't do what Elise does, but understands it enough to be dangerous. Can you give us your perspective on how that data is gathered and used?
Yeah, I think there are different levels of simulator. Yeah, two of them are the one that you try the boat, kind of. We see it in the new SailGP teams as well forming. They're using the old Artemis simulator. And then there are two more levels, I think. What Elise is talking about is the interface between the boat and the and trying different kind of settings. So, and then how the settings get actually chosen. I guess you have different levels of fidelity coming in the simulator. So for example, if Elise is doing a lot of CFD simulations or structural analysis, those are the kind of higher fidelity methods. And then, but then you can have lower fidelity methods, which are very quick to process. I guess Elise, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes like for the sails, you have a kind of, lifting line methods or panel methods, which are a bit quicker. And you don't need that many higher fidelity CFD results to interpolate through if you have some kind of lower or mid fidelity methods that you rely on, and they're quite good. And especially for, well, these foiling boats, we're all looking at lifting surfaces. So you can have a wide range of results. Yeah, from very simple to very complex computer simulations. And if you trust, as say Team New Zealand and Luna Rossa for sure, they trust their simulators. It means that they have a very good blend of these accurate and low accurate methods.
Awesome. And for on the practical side of things, and then I'll go to Guillaume on the designer side of things. Francesco, you still there? Maybe he's parking. We'll move.
Yes, I am parking. I am parking. 1 minute.
Don't you have an autonomous car that can park for you?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Cool. Well, if you can process this, I wanted to see. I'm assuming that Luna Rossa has someone like Elise that's gathering and analyzing this data and giving it to the designers and the sailors to get some practical use out of it. What value for the skipper, you know, someone driving the boat, and the sailors, does the information that Elise provides in her kind of corner of the world in the mechatronics?
I'm not mechatronics.
Oh, you're not? You are?
No,
Tell me.
performance engineer.
Performance engineer. There you go. So, so from the information that Elise gathers and that Laura was kind of, you know, telling us all these different parts and where they interface, what's the value to the person driving the boat and the crews? How do you guys, do you have another filter from the coaches that gets that information to you to make it useful? Or do you look at data yourself and look at these spreadsheets to figure out, or, charts to figure out, how you can practically use that information to improve performance?
I think in Luna Rossa we had a slightly different system.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain, but basically, yeah, we had all these mechatronics departments working and trying to really use the simulator as a tool, but also other things. But for us, was very, very helpful. Actually, I can put the video on now. I've just parked.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
We had for us as drivers, all the help we had from the engineers was great, especially at the beginning, because we didn't knew the boats at all, and having the simulator was a fantastic huge help, because when we stepped on the boat, it was a little bit like not having everything new to us, but at least we had a little bit of experience on the simulator, and that gives us a little bit of sense of, okay, we have done this already. It's not everything totally new, and of course all the numbers, the spreadsheets, they all helped, but the biggest help for us was the simulator as a tool, especially at the beginning.
Cool. And Guillaume, were there from either the tools or from the actual data, between when the boats, let's say when in the first year of the design, the beginning, when the big boats hit the water, to when the boats finished and New Zealand won in March, I guess it was there either a tool or a number or a set of numbers that you looked at more heavily for performance, improving performance in March, that you didn't really realize was as important in December or March the year before? Do you know what I'm asking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, more or less, but I'd like to say that, it's so the VVP, or the simulator, which is really the simulator, is just a dynamic VVP.
Yeah.
You can have a huge mistake in drag, and have a small mistake in performance, in speed. You could have maybe a 15-20% mistake in drag on the delta speed of that is not that huge. You know, we talk about maybe 0.5 knots, but at the speed at which these boats are going, it's very hard to spot it. So
Okay.
I think that's where, you know, the art of those data analysis is very important, is to be able to pick it up so that we compare to our theoretical model. So it's really making the comparison between the analysis on the water on, I think a lot of improvement has been done with watching what was going on under the water, you know, the cavitation where it was occurring, ventilation, and on the feeling of the sailor was a huge improvement. So that's nice to see that the quality of the sailor and the quality of the interaction of the people in the team is probably much more important than, you know, a simulator. It just is a kind of video game, and it will not indicate you so well why you've got such a problem of performance in a way. It will help you to understand if the boat sails correctly, if you can take a turn at that speed. It will help you at finding tricks for sailing sometimes. But I think we did a huge improvement by being able to correlate, for example, the video together of underwater with seeing the detachment of the flow and comparing it to our theoretical model on the image we have from CFD, for example, you know, comparing the CFD picture. So this is not really the VPP that did that job, or neither the simulator. It's it's really the quality of the analysis and the quality of the people that are doing the work behind, like Nico Chins or Bobby or Elise, or, you know, those that work on the foil. But then again, I think there's the VPP where it's really helpful or the simulator is pushing you to understand the correct foil location once everything works pretty okay. But you could still be within 10% mistake, you know, and 10% mistake is maybe a winning or losing boat. But at the beginning, we could not compare one to each other. Comparing the speed of the boat on the water is very difficult because we could not record the wind speed and so on. So that's been quite a tricky game, I'd say. It's really nice that we could not record the speed, the wind speed on the water, because it made it really much more complex and a bit closer to feelings of people and so on. But a lot of the value of this boat is brought by the sailor feedback, the interaction they have with us, and discussions and so on. So which is a nice thing. It's not, we are not. I mean, there's artificial intelligence in all team and so on, but I don't think it's what drove the bus. I mean, Elise, you may have a different opinion. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think a lot is to the quality of the analysis of people like Elise.
Yeah, all the feedback from the sailors is huge. And them saying, you know, where the simulator is different to reality, whether that's purely something that's not modeled quite right in the simulator, or if it's also not right in the steady state VPP. So yes, and then I guess that's what drives the development of those tools, is where are the differences and how achievable it is to overcome those differences by, you know, writing some different code around it.
I love we're gonna move this into the human direction, and I love the fact that Guillaume brought that up, because the one thing that we realize, you know, there's a worry, you know, that the design technology, like the simulator technology, you can just trust it, right? And like, what's the point in having Francesco's feedback or you know, other things? We worry that, you know, the fact that a lot of these boats can be run by, you know, like we've seen in SailGP, and you guys know, by very few humans, because the, you know, the software is so good in terms of, you know, how the boat can be steered, ride height control, all that stuff. But the one thing that Guillaume said that rings true in Foiling Week, our most recent panel discussion was on the outright speed record with Paul Larson and Don Montague, two awesome people in the speed world. And I said, wow, what design concept, that we're going to be interviewing this week has the best chance at cracking 65.45 knots, which is Paul Larson's record. And he said, yeah, both look pretty good. But, the way to break a speed record is to have some leaders and a team of individuals that just won't stop. And if they get all hot the first year and then they kind of lose stamina over the second and third year in their team, their feedback isn't as good and the project won't reach its potential. And I think that's what it's really refreshing to hear, that the input of the sailors, and the data analysis by someone like Elise, the human element, is really what makes the difference. And Francesca, were there times where what you were feeling was different than what the coaches and simulators were telling you? And did you ever question yourself?
Many times. And at the end, Guillaume is right. The water is the final element giving you the right answers. A lot of times that simulator didn't have the right numbers, was not doing the right calculations. I don't know what was wrong, but was clearly different from reality. And as I said, the simulator helped us a lot on going on the water with some experience, and it helped us during the campaign to do some improvement to the boats. But vice versa, the simulator without the experience in the water would have never been where it was at the end of the campaign. It was a continuous, constant double check both sides to improve where we could. So yeah, absolutely. There were many times where the experience on the water was completely different from what we would see on the simulator and other tools, and in the end we had to do some adjustments to what the predictions were, and sometimes the VPP or a dynamic VPP like the simulator doesn't take into account some variables that cannot be there, like waves, paths, how dynamic the wind can be, and because of that you have to do a compromise between the perfect design, which is probably flat water, constant wind, and then what you really need to win a race.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Elise. Did you have something?
Yeah, I'd say we had pretty similar experiences of sort of periods of heavy simulator usage, like early on through that whole class development. Pete and Blair were flying back between Volvo stopovers and getting time. So yeah, definitely used heavily at the start, and getting used to inputs, devices, and doing as much as possible before boat one, because we didn't have any sort of test boat before boat one. We're straight into the real one. So while, for example, Ineos was out on their little boat, they were first in the water, we didn't have anything till the launch of boat one. So I guess we used it quite heavily through then. And then I guess it had highs and lows. So say during level 4 lockdown, a couple of the sailors were set up to sail at home, so able to keep testing, and some of the foil designers sending through more foils to test and stuff. But yeah, probably generally used less probably as time went on, but not sort of in a linear manner, ups and downs along the way. And yeah, I'd say that's not reality is a definite line I've heard several times with the simulator.
I think it's
the other way around on the water, being, oh, that's just like the simulator. It's like, yes, finally.
Go ahead, Guillaume.
It nearly helped us more in the Bermuda campaign, the simulator. It helped us finding the trick to tack
Interesting.
Using reverse downward force on the windward foil and these kind of things.
Maybe that's partially because of the platform.
Yeah, we could understand it this way, and I think it made us bigger bumps last time. But it was a lot of fine analysis, I guess, this time, comparing profiles with reality, and a lot of detailed work, really. That was and pushing. It was a bit of a drag race in every department. Once you know the balance of the boat is correct, and that the foil is positioned at the correct location, it's a bit of a drag race in the rudder, a drag race in the aero, and drag race. So it could be split nearly in departments, and then put it back together, rerunning the simulation to see if things have changed as a global balance, and the interaction of one to the other. Sometimes it's slightly coupled, but it's quite uncoupled often.
Well, I want to steer this direction in terms of the final product. We can talk about, we're not going to talk about sails and even aero at the moment for the hulls, because we only have a couple more minutes. But the one thing in Foiling Week we like to do is connect not like the trickle down is an overused term, but connect what you guys have learned to the rest of the foiling world, because still things are developing in different corners of wind sports and also transportation and other areas, the lessons that you guys learned. I mean, we know that the ridiculous amount of time, effort, and money that was put into the 2013 Cup, that had all that information jump-started the use of hydrofoils in water sports. Even though that, sup foiling, moths, and kite foiling, on the recreational side of things, were getting going, there were huge leaps and lessons learned that came out of 2013 that literally set into motion a dozen or more classes of foiling boats. And it needed that boost. So we're going to wrap this up almost by saying, is it as simple for me to say that we learned from this last Cup what best hydrofoils look like? We talked a lot about the shape changes of a delta looking foil from the British team versus the super high aspect flat with little turned up wing tips for Team New Zealand, and then something in between with Luna Rossa, and the difference between percentage of area of a flap versus the leading edge of the foil. We know with surf foils and wing foils now, what ratios are starting to feel better. But did everyone have the same takeaway? Is the Team New Zealand kind of high aspect flat foil shape the future of the AC75 class? Is that what we learned? Or are there still a lot of different foil profiles and plan forms of foils that can work just as well? Is it narrow now what we think is great, or is it still very different?
As not a foil designer, I think a lot of it comes down to the trade-off. So if you're simply designing a foil for 8-knot conditions, like marginal foiling or something, versus 12 knots versus top end 18, 20 knots, they're going to be very different foils, and also between upwind, downwind. So it's sort of, how do you weight those performance in different conditions, and how costly it is to have those suboptimal foils most of the time. And where you choose to really put your efforts and, make either the least compromise in one particular chosen condition, or to even it out across the board. Without a doubt, the AC75s win could have gone a lot faster than they did if you were really, if you put super cavitating foils on or something. But then they would have been really useless in light airs. So that's a big part of a design challenge, is trying to make the best boat across that whole range of conditions. I think it was 6.5 to 23 knots or something. So big range between probably unable to get on the foil until you get a gust through to just probably Francesco would know better, but trying to get around the racetrack in one piece. So yeah, it's where you're trying to target. And
yeah, I just want to add, am I on?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, no, I just want to add also, I totally agree, but I want to add that what we have seen is shaped around the rules. And if one single line of the rules change, the best foil could be completely different. And I'm talking rules for everything, flap, wind speed, any rule. I think what we have seen as a best foils was what we had for those rules. And again, if the rules has a small change, you may see a foil that is completely different being the best.
That's an awesome point, because we know this just going back to boat design, that with the CCA rule for racing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then the IOR rule from the 70s and 80s influenced the design of not just race boats, but cruising boats. And that's limiting. And I guess I didn't think about it that way, but we're seeing foils as a result of all these design parameters and use parameters. And it could be, we can see totally different foil shapes if, like Francesco said, one line in the rule is changed for the next cup cycle. Does that make sense, Guillaume?
Yes. Well, these boats are really, it's a bit like an open 60 between the top of the waves and the bottom of the waves. Top of the waves, you accelerate like crazy, you're stuck in the bottom of the waves. Suddenly the apparent wind is changing a lot. Here in the cup is similar. You've got to take off. You've got to choose at what speed you take off. You've got to respect the rule, as Francesco was mentioning, which of course is right, will change completely the shape of the foil. So really our game, whether it's a sail design or foil design, you've got to make the two in one. So being able to take off at low speed, or exactly the speed you expect, like that much at 8 knots of wind speed or whatever. And to be able to go to the top range where you've got an incredible apparent wind speed, above 50 knots. So really you have to have a sail that is able to be super deep at the start, and then you are capable to flatten it a lot. And you have to have a foil that is capable to have a huge camber line, a lot of camber, so that you don't have too much wetted area to take off. And then as you go fast, well, you don't have the ideal shape. It will start to cavitate way too early and so on. But you have to play with that, and you find all the tricks of you can imagine, and we wasted a lot of time imagining some tricks, and it's not finished. That's where the next cup is going to be, probably to find some new tricks. Maybe the rule will open up in some fields or some others. We'll see. But
awesome.
So a lot of the work of the people will have been to look at the deformed shape of the foil under load. So doing the structure analysis combined with the fluid analysis and all this integrated into the VPP and so on. So maybe Laura would like to say, because she didn't talk too much, but she probably has experienced a lot of this as well.
Yeah, I think the fluid structure interaction, as you're saying, that's quite key, especially for the trickle down to transport, as you're saying, Chris. Yeah, being able to have very kind of tight maneuvers in sea keeping conditions, those will be kind of key areas of improvement to the trickle down of the technology. because yeah, if you do design a passenger ferry, foiling passenger ferry, you can't have it crashing kind of like we saw sometimes people have in the Cap. Yeah, so pushing in this interaction yeah, between the vertical and the horizontal part of the foils, for example, and working quite a lot on what you can do if you don't have the right design at that time. I think will be important for, you know, this trickle down of the technology.
Fantastic. And we are running out of time, but this is great because I love tying in this kind of tight little corner of racing and designing and racing in America's Cup boat to where even just figuring out how to use these tools or how to even think about something. You know, Guillaume, you brought up an awesome point because how dynamic the playing field is, like in an IMOCA, where there's a lot of heavy acceleration and deceleration, is a lot more akin to the practical applications for Lauda in the maritime space, because they are in, you know, varied conditions that aren't controlled. You know, ferries have extremes where you say, okay, we're not going to run the ferry today, but generally they sail in a bigger range of conditions than an America's Cup yacht. So, and it's awesome to see the practical side of those things, because we can be in this kind of self-made universe. I promised everyone I'd ask what you are personally up to in your sport or recreation. So we'll start with Francesco, work back through Elise and Guillaume. But Francesco, well, when are you going sailing next? And what's your jam right now? What's your funnest thing to do?
I'm flying tonight to Foiling Week, Malcesine.
Yay!
You there?
Yeah, awesome. And what's your jam right now? What kind of sailing are you enjoying doing yourself?
I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm doing a Sail GP with Team Japan. I'm doing the Moth at the Foiling Week at the Worlds in Lake Garda. Yeah. I'm doing some traditional sailing on the Swan class. I'm doing a lot of stuff.
Cool. Well, I know your daughter's really into rock climbing, but are you taking her sailing?
No, she's into windsurfing now, like my son.
Oh, awesome. Cool. And how about you, Elise? I know you just had a championship.
Yeah, we had a very, very late in the season WASP Cup Championships over the weekend. We had 12 boats out on the water, so that's not bad for the very middle of winter in New Zealand. Yes, yeah, I've had my WASP since I've been a little bit into Team New Zealand and am class president here for it. So there's a bit of admin stuff to do and trying to round up people to turn up to events and trying to get some more girls into the class, because there's definitely a lot more males in the class than females. So trying to, when the weather is nice, try and take some of the girls who are interested out when it's as nice and easy as possible, flat water, not too much wind, but enough to get out. So trying to help the class along a bit.
And what does that do for you, either as a designer, as a person, just getting, going through your progression in that boat?
Yeah. So there's times where, I have parallels between the WASP and AC75. And I guess that's part of, I can sort of speak sailor with the sailors and I can speak engineer with the engineers and kind of can, I guess, explain some of, when you have some of the very, very technical engineers saying something that I can maybe understand and explain it in another way that sort of a sailors can understand. So yeah, sort of being able to speak both languages, I think works quite well.
Perfect. And Guillaume, last we spoke, you were launching your old Far boat. What are you doing these days? Are you going out sailing? You might be frozen in space.
So these days, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, maybe my connection of internet is not very good. So I'm working on the class 40 new Pogo. So So it's an interesting project I do with a yard called Structure. I did go for mini foiling, and I have 4 Open60 being built at the moment. So they're going to be launched progressively on quite a few sets of foils for them as well that are going to be shown very soon. I've got some refit of the old Open60, so it keeps us quite busy with all the team working with me. And project foiling that I'm not allowed to disclose too much. It will be an interesting one. It's a huge project. If it happens to be, it's probably the most interesting project I've worked on, because there's a lot of challenge to be done, and it's not the problem you have. You cannot take the AC75 and put it in the water to do a Sydney over, for example. That will never fit any regulations. So
right,
of course, stability. So it's dynamic for of the sails of the rig. To transpose that kind of knowledge we grew up in to make it practical to some offshore boats. So there's a lot to understand there. A lot of people have tried to make SIGs and so on, but not really with great success. So surely some thoughts to be given there. And we work as well on the wooden boat, classic a launch powerboat, 60 foot, sorry. And we do 45-meter catamaran, which is actually a floating museum. So we do different things, we try to have a variety of things. We work for Ferrari a little bit to design the aerodynamic of a car. We do some different stuff.
But how about you? Are you getting sailing, or it's too cold for you now?
Are you talking to me, sorry?
Yeah. Are you getting out on the water?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking to Laura. So I've been sailing in probably about a month ago to Great Barrier, and that was beautiful on a little boat I have. And I'll be sailing when I go back to France in 15 days.
Cool. Awesome. And what would you be sailing in France?
Yeah. So on some of the IMOCA on Gitana as well, the big trimaran.
Cool.
Yeah, I forgot to say we work a lot on Gitana at the moment.
Okay, and that's the ultimate trimaran?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Well, that's
a lot of work we do. Each month, it's a big chunk of our work. Yeah.
I think that's the boat that if you ask any sailor who's into performance sailing, what boat would you like to sail on the most? That might be the one. That's exciting.
Yes, correct.
Francesco, I was going to ask you, but that's it, right?
Yes,
foiling ultime?
yes, 100%.
Okay, you got that, Guillaume? He's asking for a ride.
I think it will not be complicated. We can organize that.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap this up, everyone. So Francesco, put your camera on. And Laura and I, as guests, we don't get to talk as much about ourselves. But thank you for joining Foiling Week and talking about the AC75 and bringing it all the way back around in terms of how it's used, what you learn, how it's used in other areas. And we'll see everything you all are doing. And I hope, Guillaume, we get to see that, that mysterious big monohull project that you're working on. Elise, good luck at your next event. Francesco, good luck in the Moths next week. I hope you are successful. And Laura, thank you very much. So this is the close of the AC75 segment for Foiling Week 2021 in the Gurit Forum. And we will see you at the next one. Thank you so much, everyone. Well done.
Thank you.
Cheers. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. That was really awesome to get you all together.
Yeah.